Hi, I'm Jamie Poisson. For the last decade, I've been a newspaper reporter. And lately, I'm just finding it hard to keep up with the news.
As of today, simple possession of marijuana is no longer illegal.
It can be hard to make sense of things.
Investigators spent 9 hours in the consulate.
Disappearance or murder.
I want to change that, at least a little. Join me weekdays at 6 a.m. for Front Burner, a daily podcast from CBC News. Subscribe now, wherever you get your podcasts.
This is a CBC podcast.
Danse, Anine, Boujou, hello and welcome. This is Unreserved on CBC Radio 1. I'm Rosanna Deerchild. Today we're rolling out the red carpet from Los Angeles. Just in time for the Oscars to talk about the push to decolonize Hollywood from the inside.
Despite some key milestones in Oscars history, there really hasn't been much focus on Indigenous filmmakers, Indigenous actors, or really contemporary Indigenous stories.
We'll head to Paramount Studios to meet the 5 Indigenous writers working on a brand new sitcom.
It's a really exciting time because I feel like we're all getting to do something that is like genuinely funny, genuinely interesting, but also very much from a Native perspective.
And hear how people are raising the visibility of Indigenous tribes that have called LA home long before Tinseltown.
When I see the beautiful Hollywood Hills, I actually see the hill and feel like it's part of me as a traditional person, but with this funny white sign on it.
But before we get into all that, did you know that Universal Studios was built on an Indigenous village site?
The Hollywood sign is somewhere around here. Over the hill, like, see that peak up there? And then the Hollywood sign is somewhere like on this back side of it. We're walking around trying to find the entrance to Universal Studios. My name is Timothy Ornelas. I'm a citizen of the Fernandinho Tataviam Band of Mission Indians. I'm a videographer and I work for my tribe. I am born and raised here in the San Fernando Valley, which is the north end of Los Angeles. If you look at how high up we are, that's why I get so lost here. You can't see anything on top of the hill.
Not really a walking city.
No, too many hills. I think we go this way. We're right in front of Universal Studios, the theme park over here in Hollywood, and there's like literally a red carpet that leads guests right up to the entrance to the park. When you think about locations like theme parks like Disneyland, Six Flags, and Universal Studios, a lot of people don't know the traditional uses of the land. And when you look at this theme park, it's a place of fantasy too. You know, you have Hogwarts and you have the Jaws ride, and there are places that are surreal, but the reality is, you know, if you look at the history of these places, these are traditional homelands of Indigenous folk that are located here and still located here in Los Angeles County. Universal Studios does lay on a village site, a traditional village site of Cahuenga, and my family is located, and we come from Encino, which is what you can see right down from the hill. So these lands used to be ours, if you want to say it straight. People just come here and enjoy it, but it had to be taken away at first to be enjoyed. But yeah, like if you look at anywhere in Los Angeles County, and especially my tribes, we're located kind of regionally here. We have village sites that are here, and you see a lot of the land has been disturbed. It's not what it used to be, so you could take into consideration the digging and the groundbreaking that had to take place for these things to happen. So there is a backside to seeing places that people get to have fun. Even as a kid growing up, you know, it was always right here, so, and it is cheaper than Disneyland, and it was so it was pretty easy for my family to come up here and take us. I used to have fun, use it as an escape. It takes a lot to rethink that, and how can you save yourself from feeling bitter towards that? And I think that's where I'm at personally when I look at these places now, and it's hard to enjoy them. Everything about LA is about Hollywood, the Hollywood life. You know, like I went to school in Hollywood too, so like I was part of that. Like, oh, there's the industry here. You know, there's TVs get made here. All of that is here. And then, you know, when you start talking to people, you know, I work in the industry with, I always ask them, where'd you come from? And it's never LA. You know, it makes me feel so unique to like say like, oh, I'm from here. What I would like people to think of when they first come into LA is who is here first and who is still here right now. There is a lot of significance just to knowing that. And what's the story of the city? And there's apps now that even do that, say whose land you're on. Look that up. I want people to come here with a historical curiosity. It's so paved, it's so developed. Unfortunately, we're not a tribe that has a cultural center. We just want them to come and maybe visit us or maybe call us or look us up online, like anything, do anything before you come here to just be curious. Having a place like Universal Studios acknowledge the original peoples here, I think will be a great step because there are a lot of tourists here, right? Know whose home you're going into. So when you drive around, you don't even think twice about these certain places, like street names, these city names like Cahuenga. But they're from indigenous names. They're from native names, so. And growing up here in LA, myself was kind of a stereotype. Going through middle school, you tell people, because everyone asks, like, what are you? And I'd say, I'm this, and, I'm Native American. And you just get always thrown those stereotypes, like, do you guys have a teepee? Or they do, like, something racist, like a sound. Any stereotype that you got from growing up watching cartoons like Peter Pan or watching TV shows where all the Indians die. So in middle school, I ended up not saying I was Native American anymore because it was so embarrassing. When you hit 7th grade, there's like a little paragraph about the people that were here, and you get a little map. And I remember seeing that map and feeling so proud just because Tataviam was on it. But that was it. I told my mom about the map, and then she told my grandfather, who was chief of the tribe at the time. And he came to the school with my uncle and talked about us as people, talked about us presently as people. What are we doing as people? And I felt like that was such a power move, like we're not just a paragraph in a history book. We're people here, and we're here to talk to you. This industry, working in it, is hard in a lot of ways because of the stereotypes that they propelled. You do see these native writers, indigenous writers come in, and they're changing that, right? They're coming in and saying, like, we're not going to just tell that story, like that historically that's wrong and that hurts us. We're going to tell this story from our lens and with our voice. So being now in this industry, it feels very powerful and it feels very, very important.
That was Tataviam videographer Timothy Ornelas. This is Unreserved on CBC Radio 1, Sirius XM 169, and Native Voice 1. I'm Rosanna Deerchild. Today we're talking all about decolonizing Hollywood and recognizing the indigenous lands that LA is built upon. Still ahead.
California actually has always been the home of indigenous people. Historically, pre-contact, pre-European times, it actually was the home to more tribes and more indigenous people than all of the United States put together.
You'll meet Tongva actress Tanatzin Carmelo. That's coming up in just a few minutes. The Imaginative Film Festival is a trailblazing platform for Indigenous filmmakers and storytellers. The event takes place every year in Toronto, and they just celebrated their 20th anniversary. The festival continues to grow, and recently they got some big news. Imaginative is now the first and only Indigenous festival to qualify films for the Oscars. Jason Ryle is the executive director of Imaginative. Jason, welcome.
Hi, Rosanna.
So as I said, this is big news. How did you react when you were told that Imaginative became a qualifying festival for the Oscars?
There were a lot of emotions, I can't lie. It was incredibly exciting. I mean, of course. It felt very satisfying, particularly to come at our 20th anniversary. And for me, it also felt very hopeful that more attention from the larger industry will be paid to Indigenous filmmakers. So it was a beautiful day.
So what does it mean to actually to be a qualifying festival for the Oscars?
Well, normally the Oscars in some of its different categories, the members of each branch, for example, the editors, will choose who are the nominees for the editing Oscar for that particular year. Mm-hmm. For some of the categories, including Best Short Film, Best Live Action Short, Best Animation Short, and the Documentary Short Prize, they also use partner festivals, so Oscar qualifying festivals is the official name for it, to help select possible nominees for a long list. So in partnership with festivals like Imaginative and other festivals internationally, the film that may win a particular prize at that festival could then become automatically considered for the Oscar shortlist.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's exciting.
It is. And I know the Oscars have been on this push in the last few years to diversify their ranks and to really share the wealth. And I think the addition and inclusion of Indigenous members in the past few years, Zacharias Kunuk, Alanisa Bompswin, Bird Runningwater, Danis Goulet have all been added as Academy members. And so Imaginative really getting this acknowledgement as a qualifying festival is another step in that dream of getting Indigenous filmmakers nominated. Mm-hmm. And to win the Oscar. I mean, that's obviously a dream of mine.
Yeah. So we're talking about the Oscars and decolonizing Hollywood on the show today. What are your earliest memories of watching the Oscars?
Do you know, I have to admit, I love the Oscars.
Mm-hmm.
I remember those early days, my mom talking about Chief Dan George and having a sense of who he was. And he received his Oscar nomination in 1970, I believe, so before I was born. But I remember the pride and the impact, and then finding out he was nominated for an Oscar was something really great. I mean, at that point, no one had really been, especially male actors. So it was a big moment.
So this year, legendary Cherokee actor Wes Studi, as you know, became the first Indigenous actor to receive an honorary Oscar for his acting work. We know Buffy won for the song, but this is for acting. How long do you think it will be before an Indigenous filmmaker or an actor wins another Oscar?
There's so many incredible films coming down the pipe in Canada and elsewhere. And Wes's honorary Oscar, Taika and Chelsea's nominations this year. I really, really sincerely hope that this is a change that's coming and we'll see someone very soon. I mean, I really hope in the next 10 years, I really expect in the next 10 years, we'll see an Indigenous Oscar winner. Yeah.
Taika Waititi has been amazing this year. And in the larger picture, what do you see the future? What do you think the future is for Indigenous filmmakers and films moving forward?
I think it's so bright. I think it's so exciting. It's tremendous. I've been working with Imaginative for 17 years. And those early years of the festival, we really had to go out there and seek work. Part of it is that we were a new festival, but also a big part of it was that the quantity of work just wasn't being made as it is now. And the last several years, certainly the last decade, has been a revolution in global cinema when it comes to Indigenous-made works. For Canada, with very great Indigenous-specific funding, we always need more, but it's there in place that other countries don't have. And with the emergence of the Indigenous Screen Office, too, it's really rare. I mean, we have more Indigenous-made feature films at various stages of production than any country internationally that I know of. And that's a great thing. We're going to be hearing Indigenous people in control of stories that they're telling from within their communities, representing their nations, brought to global audiences. And I can't think of anything more exciting than that.
Well, it is exciting. Thank you for your time today, Jason.
A pleasure. Thanks, Rosanna.
Jason Ryle is the executive director of Imaginative, which is now the first and only Indigenous festival to qualify films for the Oscars. Molokai Bound, a Hawaiian film which won the Best Live Action Short at Imaginative in October, can now be considered for an Oscar in 2021.
One Saturday morning in June 1999, 15-year-old Sharmini Anandavel disappeared and never came home. No one has ever been charged with her murder. But there was a suspect.
Never, ever have I met a man like him.
I'm Michelle Shepard. This season on Uncover.
I don't recall making that comment.
Okay, that's fine if you don't recall it, but I'm telling you that's what you told me. Uncover Sharmini. Available now wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Unreserved on CBC Radio 1, Sirius XM 169 and Native Voice 1. I'm Rosanna Deerchild. On the show today, we're talking all about decolonizing Hollywood. Pamela Peters is a Navajo photographer who is reimagining old Hollywood through an Indigenous lens. In her photo series, Real Indians Retake Hollywood, Peters recreates iconic Hollywood portraits of actors like Audrey Hepburn, James Dean, and Ava Gardner. She's retaking these photos using contemporary Indigenous actors. Peters' large collection of photography books inspired her photo series.
I wasn't kidding when I said I had a lot of books of Hollywood. This one, The Day in the Life of Hollywood. This was my first book. It was given to me as a gift. These portraits of all these actors, studio lots, in the movies, long ago when they would do calls. Here's one of some Indians. It's a photo of two gentlemen in buckskins and headdresses, and then it has a woman in a traditional regalia holding feathers. But see, that's how they saw Indians as actors. As much as I say I don't like Hollywood, I do love Hollywood. I love the images. I just don't like the fact that they are not inclusive. So these are the photos on my Instagram. You can just go on Real Indians Retake Hollywood, and you can see some of my portraits. This image is of a young actress, Jane Collins, and she is from the Dakota Crow Reservation. She's an actress here in Hollywood from Poplar, Montana, and she is channeling the classic icon, the actress Jane Russell. I use some of the lighting that's similar to what George Hurl has done. You know, the spotlight, the bright lights in the face. And then here is Brian channeling in Clyde Barrow from Bonnie and Clyde. I mean, I think Annie Leibowitz's style came out when I did the whole Bonnie and Clyde part of the series. And even just some of the images, that film noir, I don't know, I love it. You don't see natives in that context at all. I think the fact that we're not part of that history of film and photography in this whole Hollywood setting, you've erased the concept of our participation in cinema when you don't see us in that time frame. And that's part of the whole take on Retake Hollywood, is to say, let's go back and reshoot that and give us an existence during that time frame. Real Indians Retake Hollywood is a collection of photography to dismantle those false perception that Indian actors cannot be seen in a different light. It's been customary to put Indians into this relic image in Hollywood, and I wanted to shed light in a different perspective and show Native actors in a more dignified and more contemporary but also nostalgic look of natives, as opposed to seeing them mostly seen as relic Indians in buckskin and feathers and painted face. Because we're more than that. We're more than what's stuck in the past. We are in the present. Why can't we see these native actors as possible leading roles? A possible Audrey Hepburn or Tony Curtis, James Dean. I seeked out actors that I knew that were from tribal nations, from reservations, and I wanted to shed light in a different way of them being actors as opposed to them just being Indian actors. They're just actors. And I wanted to showcase them in one of my favorite cinema, which is classic Hollywood. I'm such a huge fan of different photographers. I'm a huge fan of George Hurl's. He's a well-known classic Hollywood photographer. I just love what he did with light. I love that he just brought this beautiful glamour to his photos. Looking at some of the actors that I knew, I started visualizing them in these classic Hollywood icons like, James Dean and Tony Curtis and Audrey Hepburn. The first one I thought of Audrey Hepburn was Shana Jackson, because I always looked at her and I've seen her acting, I've seen her perform. I was like, oh my God, she could totally be an Audrey Hepburn. And why isn't she? Why isn't she known as an actor and as a performer? I approached her and I said, hey, you know, I'm doing this project and I would love for you to be my Audrey Hepburn. And she just like totally freaked out and she was excited. She was like, I love it. I'm on board. Let's do it. And come to find out, she's a huge Audrey Hepburn fan. That was a fun shoot with her. I'm Navajo, I guess what you call an urban Navajo. My whole family resides on the Navajo reservation in Arizona and in New Mexico. But I'm the only one that lives out here. Yeah, we're here in LA, Los Angeles. As a kid on the reservation, we didn't have a television set until I was a bit older. And we had this black and white small television set. And my dad loved watching Saturday Western cinema. And I started watching them with him and seeing his reaction to all these Western films. And it was kind of weird and creepy when I look at it now, because he would cheer to kill the Indians. And I'm like, wait a minute, aren't we Indians? And I didn't really understand the concept of films and the impact it had. But I think as a kid, I knew something wasn't right. But I still just enjoyed watching them. I remember all the teenagers really liked Billy Jack. And I watched this Billy Jack movie and I'm like, wait a minute, is that a white guy? But he's trying to be Indian? But it's pretty cool because, you know, he has a cool hat. So I got exposed to Billy Jack. The one film that really impacted me as a child is when I saw The Outlaw Josie Wells. And I was such a young kid, but I was so intrigued by seeing that because I saw this Navajo woman in it and she was speaking Navajo. And I remember when we saw it in the auditorium, everyone was silent when she was speaking because they're like, oh my God. And then there was this like applause. That's the impact that I think film can generate, especially to young kids. That's why for me today, that's why it's important and how I really want to see more representation of real Indians in films, because I remember what it did to me as a kid. Because, you know, seeing Billy Jack and then seeing, well, that person doesn't look like me, but then seeing Outlaw Josie Wells and seeing this Navajo woman who looks like me, talks like me, then I come to find out she's from my community. And I was just like amazed. And, you know, fast forward a couple decades later, I'm on this panel of Native American women in film, and I got to meet her. Her name is Jerry Keems. And I was like telling her, I was like, you're like a celebrity I've been wanting to meet, you know, since I saw you as a kid. I think I got tired of seeing natives only playing these relic Indians. And just even some of the interviews that I've done with these actors, they told me that if they say they're Native American actors, then they get pigeonholed into that role. And they don't want to be pigeonholed into just one specific idea of a character. I hope people will see them in a different light as opposed to just, you know, the buckskin and feathers and the non-speaking roles. Well, I love my coffee table books of Hollywood. I would love to redo one with all the Native actors that I know and have them dress up in this Hollywood glamour like you see in my George Hurl's Hollywood book of Native actors. Retaking these images and, you know, seeing us in a different light.
That was Pamela Peters, a Navajo photographer living in Hollywood. To see photos from her Real Indians Retake Hollywood series, visit our website, cbc.ca/unreserved. This is Unreserved on CBC Radio 1, Sirius XM 169, and Native Voice 1. I'm Rosanna Deerchild. On the show today, we're talking all about decolonizing Hollywood.
We're walking past Stage 17. We're walking past our writer's room on the Paramount lot, Paramount Studios in Hollywood, California. Beautiful Hollywood, California. we walk down this way, there's like a fake cityscape. So it's called like Old Chicago, Old New York. Any alley can be turned into something. It's a fun environment because you don't really know what you're going to see.
Still ahead, you'll meet 5 of the writers working on a brand new sitcom for NBC who all happen to be Indigenous. That's coming up in just a few minutes. But first, earlier this year, Cherokee actor Wes Studi was awarded an honorary Oscar for his body of acting work, a first for any Indigenous actor. Just before the ceremony, he joined me for an extended interview to talk about his life, his career, and hanging up the loincloth for more comedic roles.
Oh, come on. I didn't shed the loincloth or breechcloth or whatever. Breechcloth for anything but spandex. In Mystery Men, I mean.
Yeah. And what about other roles? Did you relish those times when you didn't have to play against this stereotype?
Yeah, actually, I began to think of it in terms of crossover, ethnically non-specific. And I think we need a lot more of those kinds of things in show business right now. You know, when I first got to L.A., there was only a handful of us. We all knew each other pretty much, and many of us going in for the same parts, more or less. But I think there was really an explosion of interest in the business of filmmaking during and after Dances with Wolves and Last of the Mohicans.
So looking back over your career now, did you have a favorite role?
No.
No. Just all of them.
No, the next one.
Good. The next one. That's an excellent answer. Just a bit of my extended conversation with veteran Cherokee actor Wes Studi. If you want to hear more of that conversation, you can find it on our website, cbc.ca/unreserved. This is Unreserved on CBC Radio 1, Sirius XM 169, and Native Voice 1. I'm Rosanna Deerchild. My next guest has thought a lot about raising the visibility of the Indigenous lands that LA is built upon, and about the Indigenous tribes that have called LA home for millennia. Tonantzin Carmelo is Tongva, and her tribe has called the LA area home long before the Hollywood sign marked the hillside. Tonantzin is an actress. You might know her from Steven Spielberg's miniseries Into the West, or TV shows like Undone, Z Nation, or The Sun, just to name a few. I've reached Tonantzin in her home in L.A. Hello and welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So when you see the Hollywood sign there on the hill, something so iconic to L.A., what do you think about?
Oh, what do I think about?
So much.
Oh, I don't see it like everyone else sees it, I would imagine. As a Tongva person, of course, the word Tongva means people of the earth. And part of our belief system is that we are part of the earth and the earth is part of us. And so when I see the beautiful Hollywood Hills, I actually see the hill and feel like it's, part of me as a traditional person. So it's kind of part of our history and part of our lore, but with this funny white sign on it. That's the way I see it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, as a Tongva actress living and working in LA, how would you describe the visibility of the Tongva in Los Angeles?
The visibility has been pretty remote, actually, for a really long time. And I think currently people are kind of starting to wake up slowly. But I think that our ancestral lands are on on highly, highly desirable land that is, prime real estate and was deemed that from the very first moment. We are also like a first contact tribe. So, whatever happened to all the other tribes in the Americas happened to us in a more magnified and condensed and very rapid fashion because our land was so desirable. And so I think that's something that people have really wanted to not think about for a very, very long time. And I think people are starting to think about it, and starting to wake up from it all. And so our survival, we really had to go underground in a lot of ways. Some of us had to intermarry with other tribes that were surrounding, but still remained on our land. Some of us had to leave the land. Some of us went away for a little while, such as in my family. We actually lived on the Saboba Reservation for a while and then came back. So we all have varied histories as descendants. So it's very conflicted, very confusing to a lot of people, I think. And it's very unique as well because that's part of our history and who we are as a tribe that was on very desirable land.
Yeah. Now, you've been working in Hollywood for quite some time now. What is your take and experience in regards to Indigenous representation in TV and film?
I think it's been evolving slowly and is on its way to being a little bit more creative, a little less stereotypical, but it has a long way to go still. And the evolution has still been kind of a slow drip, but it is happening. I do see different roles that are kind of stereotypical, but there's twists to them, and there's new ideas that are interjected into them that maybe people haven't seen before. For instance, my role in Z Nation, which is, sci-fi apocalyptic zombie show, is different from what you typically have seen in the past.
Yeah. And what have we seen in the past? How would this kind of role compare to something we would see 10 or 20 years ago?
Native folks were probably very marginalized and very supporting roles.
Right, yeah.
And definitely not characters that had motivations and any, that were pertinent to the storyline.
Right. Or names in some cases.
Right, or even names, exactly. That is something that we've been working towards, I think, collectively as Native people, and it is happening, but very slowly.
Tanansi, we started talking about the Hollywood side, but what's something bigger than Hollywood that you want people to know?
I always would like people to consider the fact that California actually has always been the home of Indigenous people. Historically, pre-contact, pre-European times, it actually the home to more tribes and more people, Indigenous people, than all of the United States put together. And our presence here has always been very strong, and it remains strong today. And in particular, Tongvaland, we have a religious center that was kind of the hub of all of the surrounding Native tribes in Southern California, the Chignik religion that was based in Long Beach. And so that area has always been a cultural center for Indigenous people. So it's just kind of not ironic, but it's no accident that this is a center for Indigenous people, as it has been historically.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you.
Tanansi Carmelo is a Tongva actress. I reached her at her home in L.A. This is Unreserved on CBC Radio 1, Sirius XM 169 and Native Voice 1. I'm Rosanna Deerchild, talking all about rewriting Hollywood's image of Indigenous people from the inside. And 5 Indigenous writers and comics are doing just that, working on a brand new sitcom for NBC called Rutherford Falls. Unreserved producer Zoe Tennant met up with them on the Paramount Studio lot in L.A., just outside their writer's room, where things can get a little silly.
It really is.
Sometimes it feels like a job.
Yeah.
It's a full-time job.
It's a full-time job. No benefits.
My name is Jana Schmeeding. I'm Minakanju Lakota, and I'm a staff writer on Rutherford Falls.
My name is Bobby Wilson. I'm Sisitawan, Wahpetawan, Dakota, and I think a little bit of white. I'm staff writer.
Being an Indian was his job title.
Yeah.
Manahu, my name is Tazveros Chavez. I am a citizen of the Bishop Paiute tribe. I'm only a member of one tribe, but my other tribal affiliations are I am Navajo, Paiute, and San Carlos Apache, and I am the story editor on Rutherford Falls.
My name is Tyler Clare. I am Mohawk and Mi'kmaq from Kahnawake in Quebec. I am a staff writer on this show, and it's pretty great.
Yate Sierra Nelasianshe, Tabahe Nishle, Nikadne Bashachin, Twahaglini Dishache, Do Nikadne Dishanelli. My name is Sierra Teller Ornelas. I'm a member of the Navajo Nation. I'm born of the Edgewater people and for the Mexican people. And I'm also the co-creator of Rutherford Falls. I co-created the show with Ed Helms and Mike Schur, who both, worked on The Office, and Mike created Parks and Rec and Brooklyn Nine-Nine and The Good Place. And so we've been working on this, developing this idea for about a year and a half now. The showrunner is really sort of like the boss, but they're also a conduit between the producers and the other co-creators and the studio and the network, and then also the writers. So they're sort of kind of a jack of all trades, sort of shortstop position.
Then I'm going to say that this is the first Native showrunner in America. And I would say this is the first TV show that has this many staff writers and writers that are Native. I could be wrong, but I won't back down from it.
Don't back down.
Perfect. I let Tazbo be my hype woman.
The most basic question to start with is, what is Rutherford Falls? What is it about?
We have such a hard time explaining what the show is, but it's awesome. So, definitely splice that in there. No, it's all about the town of Rutherford Falls, which is this tiny town in upstate New York that is adjacent to a Native reservation. And the town is sort of turned upside down when there's talk of moving a statue that commemorates the founder of the town, this guy Lawrence Rutherford. And the last Rutherford to live in the town is this guy Nathan, played by Ed Helms, Nathan Rutherford, and he just loses his mind over it. And because he sort of can't let go, it causes all of these other dust-ups in the town, including his friendship with this girl Regan, who is Native American. One of the things I think that I love about Mike Schur shows is that he sets out to really try to say something big in a super funny, super accessible way. So, talking about the bureaucracy of government with Parks and Rec, or talking about, what does it mean to be a good person with The Good Place? And if I were to pitch those shows, people would be like, what the hell are you talking about? But he has a way of sort of condensing and making it funny and making it accessible in a way that I really enjoy. And so I think we're talking a lot about, what are our first stories? What is the American narrative? How does that American narrative affect all of us? And I think we've found a way to sort of make a funny, interesting version of that.
So for people who can't see where we are, could you describe a bit of where we are?
We're in a big fort on an ancient Hollywood burial ground. There's a couple Indians in there, I think. Joey Ramone.
Is he?
Well, look at his hair.
We're at Paramount Pictures Studios, so it actually is one of the oldest Hollywood studios. So you're kind of on point, Bobby. This was the old Desilu Studios, which was owned by Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball.
It's on occupied Tonga territory.
And it's haunted. It is 1,000% haunted.
We're just surrounded by a lot of sound studios, and so you get to walk past them on your way to the office and look in and see people making TV and movies. It's pretty wild. Every day that I come here, I'm like, holy bleep. I can't believe this is my life. That's what I say to myself every day.
We also settled into the office very quickly. Very, very quickly. Bobby put up artwork. We got rugs. We got pillows.
Blankets.
It got native real quick.
They're like decolonial settlers.
Literally.
Yes. We've resettled.
It's actually one of the nicest writers' rooms I've ever worked in. They usually look like these really fratty, sad dorms. It's pretty chill. There's IKEA plants and furniture and blankets. It's nice. There's so many snacks.
Oh my God, so many snacks!
Oh my God. When I was a kid and I would go to my white friends' houses, they all had pantries. Chips and fruit snacks and Lunchables and Capri Suns, and I didn't have that. And so this kitchen, I feel is amazing.
Yeah, we are the rich kids now.
Totally. And day one, we were so if we could have water, that'd be great.
Now, can I get a juice?
Fruit gushers! Fruit gushers!
And I'd love to chat with you about how you work together. What does a day of work look like? Are you making each other laugh?
Just watch the movie Black Cloud. It's like that. A lot of sadness. Yeah. Dad issues. A lot of fights. There's one wall that we can all punch holes through. Yeah.
So I'm getting a lot of straight answers from the corner here. Yeah.
It's a pretty traditional writer's room. You know, we blue sky, and then we just go through and sit on a couch together and talk about the things that have happened in our lives. And that's what's so great about having so many Native writers is I feel like being the only Native writer on a show, when they ask you a question, you have to represent everybody. And what's so great here is if I don't have the answer, there's a good chance one of the other writers will have it, other Native writers. And it's just so nice. There's such a weight off your shoulders.
I was really amazed by how just like collaborative it has been for the last 3 weeks. Like I thought like we were going to be like off and delegated in some like random small space windowless room place, but we're actually like working together on couches all day making jokes. It's phenomenal.
So what was the first day working together like?
I can answer that because I feel like I have had a moment. I did. I really had a moment because this is the first time that I've had Native colleagues in any workplace, and it's so cool to come to work, especially in TV, and be around other Native writers. When I had my first meeting with Sierra, that Ed Helms was in the room, and her and I were just like talking, and at one point it's like she remembered he was there, and she was like, do you have anything that you want to say? And he was like, no. He was like, this is amazing. And I think what's amazing is like we get to cut out Indian 101, and we just get to get on with the humor and the stories, and it's super cool. That's the most exciting thing for me that I noticed on the first day, is that it was also the first time I think we've been the majority in any space.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It like influences the vibe and the culture of the room for sure. And it feels really familial. And it also is, I think, influencing the storytelling quite a bit. It's pretty magical.
And what about putting the writing team together? Were you a part of that, Sierra? Yes, so could you tell me about how you put a writing team together for this show?
Sure. I mean, it's really just been like, I sound like a Pollyanna, but like a dream come true in a sense of like, I figured there'd be like one Native writer and I'd have to like fight for it. And Mike was like, oh no, there should be like half the room should be Native. If it's a two-hander between a Native woman and a white guy, it should be half and half. And I was like, what? And he just has such incredible influence. So the three of us, Ed, Mike, and I met with a bunch of different writers from all different backgrounds. And it was so cool. Like, you're told all the time, you know, that like, well, they aren't out there, so it's going to be really hard. And it really wasn't. And it was just a really cool idea of like, who are the funny Native people that I know or am discovering? And then we put them all together with a bunch of other funny writers from different backgrounds and friends that I'd worked with before. It's a really exciting time because I feel like we're all getting to do something that is like genuinely funny, genuinely interesting, but also very much from a Native perspective, and kind of juxtapose that with a traditional white American perspective. I also think we're going to have like multiple Native characters. So there's like two main Native characters on the show who have very like different views of just everything. And I think there's something interesting about their scenes where Native people are talking to Native people about whatever, and not necessarily about being Native, but sometimes. And I think there's something exciting about getting to write those scenes. Yeah.
It's really going to pass the Native Bechtel test.
I don't think we're decolonizing because they still own everything. So, but we can splash some indigeneity in there, huh? Yeah, just mist them with it.
Yeah. We're indigenizing.
Well, I think part of authentic storytelling for Native people is sort of an act of decolonization, where we get to really not only tell Native stories, but tell it the way that we would tell it. And the last show I was on, I was the only Native writer, which was a great experience, but also now it's like having a built-in barometer where you're like, that either is or is not a shared experience. Mm-hmm. Or I know oftentimes we'll refer to Ty because he is from the area of the country that we're sort of basing this in. And so there's things, it's really cool to be able to have that person and say, hey, do you guys do that there or no? Or am I totally off? Or things that me and Sierra's tribes do, they don't do. And so I think that diversity within the Native voice is a form of decolonizing the way that American audiences are going to see how Native people exist.
Yeah, I also think that there's safety in numbers, a feeling of being able to truly bring, in my experience, mostly in comedy, I just feel like my work as a comedian is to continue to try to bring my authentic self to my work and to be funny about it. And when there's no other person who looks like you or has any shared experience as you, it's just that much harder to bring your full self to a space. And that has been like a truly wild experience to be able to come to work every day and have no qualms about my jokes, either people understanding them or not understanding them, or just being myself. And sometimes that means being super native-y, and sometimes it doesn't, and that's okay. And it's acceptable to not have to be performative. Being able to be myself is like truly a revolutionary feeling.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Our first press.
Thank you, Canada.
America's like 1970s Canada, native-wise, right? We're like 30 years behind.
We're about to get our Buffy St. Marie. It's gonna be a moment.
DJ now.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounded so much fun. Rutherford Falls is co-created by Sierra Teller Ornelas, Mike Schur, and Ed Helms. That was the showrunner Sierra and 4 of the writers on her team: Ty LeClaire, Tazba Chavez, Janice Schmeeding, and Bobby Wilson. The show is in production. Keep an eye out on NBC's streaming site Peacock for details. That's it for this week's episode of Unreserved. We'll be back in this radio space next week for more community culture and conversation. This episode was produced by Zoe Tennant, Kyle Musica, Stephanie Cram, and Anna Lazowski. If you want to hear the show again, you can subscribe to our podcast wherever you get yours or on the CBC Listen app. I'm your favorite cousin, Rosanna Deerchild. Thank you for listening to Unreserved on CBC Radio 1. Ecco say.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts.